to the July 11th meeting of the Sammamish City Council. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mayor Don Gerand.
Turns his mic on. Here.
Deputy Mayor Bob Keller.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Hornish.
Here.
Councilmember Kathy Huckabee.
Present.
Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
Present.
Councilmember Christy Malchow.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Odell.
Here.
Okay, Councilmember Malchow, would you lead us in the pledge?
Indeed. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we're going to suggest to move item number 5, which is new business, formation of Human Services Commission, ahead of the public hearing number 4, so that they don't have to sit around for the whole conference.
And Donna, I'd like to take off the agenda item number 2.
Item number 2, okay. Well, let's put item number 2 right after item number 5 then, before the public hearing.
Before the public hearing, 5 is new business.
524.
Yeah, after 5 and before 4,
Ah, okay.
okay?
After 5 and
Finished business.
Yeah.
We're doing 254.
Sounds strange, but that's it.
We can't count.
All those in favor of the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
By your vote of 7-0, it is approved. Okay, next on the agenda is council leadership election. And as you know, I'm resigning as mayor. I have a lot of personal commitments to handle in the latter part of the year, and thought it would be best to resign as mayor. I'll be staying on the council. Now, with Tom on the phone, he doesn't have a button to push. So if he wants to make
any sort of motion or vote.
yes, but if he wants to nominate someone, we vote in the order of nomination. So what I'm suggesting is that we suspend the rules and decide which nominee we vote on by a coin flip if there's more than one. So could I have a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney, did I do that properly? Okay, so we'll entertain nominations for the position of mayor. And I see that would be Councilmember Odell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to nominate Deputy Mayor Bob Keller for the position of mayor for the remainder of the year.
Second.
It doesn't need a second.
Oh, that's right.
Are there any other nominations?
I have a nomination done.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Ramiro Valderrama for mayor of Sammamish.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other nominations? No, then the nominations are closed. And now to decide who we're going to vote for first, Madam Clerk, do you have a coin? Okay. Okay,
Two
let's
different sides?
see. 2 heads.
I want heads.
Okay. So if it's heads, we'll vote first for Valderrama. If it's tails, we'll vote first for Keller. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. Madam Clerk, you want to read it? Heads. Okay, so we vote for Councilmember Valderrama first.
Is there any discussion or no?
Are we going to have any discussion? Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. You nominated Councilmember Valderrama. Would you like to talk in favor of his nomination, Tom?
I would. We know that Ramiro has been a great council member and has the longest standing of the continuing members after January. And then I actually thought about it even more, that I know Bob would do a great job, but I know he's already decided not to continue on with council. Romero will be on for at least another 2 years with 6 years behind him. But I don't think the council has ever had somebody as mayor. I'm sorry, come January, we will have 7 members that have of whom nobody has ever been mayor. And I don't think the city has ever had that. And it just makes more sense to me to have one of somebody like Romero, one of the 3 continuing council members, to be mayor now, to have that continuity going into January. We have 4 new members coming on.
Okay. Anybody else that would like to speak? I would like to make one correction. We actually, Tom, did have a time when all 7 of us were never elected mayor. And
1999?
Kathy,
At the very
we were
beginning, but only at the beginning.
Seeing no other,
I'd like to make a comment.
okay.
I think Bob Keller has served the city well. He's at the end of his first term as council member. Yes, he's not continuing, but he has had experience as deputy mayor. He also, prior to incorporation and following incorporation, served on the Planning Advisory Board, which is a predecessor to the Planning Commission. And Bob has put a lot of time in for the city, and he's been extremely active with the community in terms of working on issues that are extremely important to the community. And I think he would make an excellent mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Malchow.
Sure, a quick comment that I think that any one of us would be able to lead the city in a fine manner, and we're talking about a very short period of time here to close out the year, but Councilmember Valderrama as well as Deputy Mayor Keller are both very fit to serve in that role, so I just want to put that caveat out there.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, I guess I'd like to make a comment, and I would second what Councilmember Malchow said, that certainly both Councilmember Keller and Councilmember Valderrama would be great. It's, after all, only 5 months left for the end of the year, and I did recognize that I could have stayed in as mayor, but I felt that I would be neglecting my duties. For one thing, I'm not going to be here for the Sammamish days and nights that occur in August. And there's a lot of other duties that I'll be missing. I've got some business issues that I have to deal with. So I think it adds a little interest to the city to have a new mayor. So is there anybody else that would like to speak? No? Then all in favor of Councilmember Valderrama for mayor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. And I'm raising my hand.
Okay. Opposed? Nay? So it doesn't pass by a 4-3 vote. The next nominee is Councilmember Keller. All in favor of Councilmember Keller for mayor, please say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Do you have an abstention?
All of an abstention goes for a
Okay, well, it looks like we have at least six in favor of Councilmember Keller. So, Councilmember Keller, you're the new mayor. Congratulations. I'll trade chairs with you. Oh, okay. Here we go.
Sitting in the middle. Great spot. Well, I guess we can start right with business. I know that,
No.
No, you need a deputy mayor now,
ooh, boy.
unless you want to be
Do I
both.
have to officially resign, then, I guess? Great. Okay, well then, starting with the deputy mayor, we'll use the same procedure, although we don't know about flipping a coin at this point. I'll take nominations for the deputy mayor position. Okay, and one is, Kathy? Yeah, sorry, new device.
I would like to nominate Councilmember Malchow, and I have just been very impressed with Councilmember Malchow and some of the challenges she's taken on, the way she's grown over the last few years. And I do think that an opportunity to experience more leadership will help spread the knowledge and wealth of those people who are coming in at the start of January. So I would be very comfortable. So that's my nomination.
Any other nominations?
No.
Comments?
I, too, support Councilmember Malchow for deputy mayor. Christie and I have worked very closely with each other on at least 2 different committees, maybe 3. And I've, like Councilmember Huckabee, have been very impressed with the way she's taken on tasks and her attention to detail. I think the city will be well served by her as deputy mayor.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Well, she didn't remove her
Oh,
button.
okay. Thank you for the help on that. I would like to make a comment myself then, because I too have served on multiple committees with Councilmember Malchow, and not only does she do her homework and is she extremely prepared for any meeting that I've attended with her, excellent perspective that she adds. So I think she would be an excellent deputy mayor. Any other comments? Then,
Call the vote?
I'd like to call the vote, please. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed, say nay. By a vote of 7-0, we have a new deputy mayor. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Good. No, we don't.
I'll wrestle him for it.
Ooh, a mayor's copy.
Are we going to do the switch here too, or?
Are you okay with
I'm
it?
fine staying here.
Okay. I'll tutor Bob.
Thank you very much. Which I would like to make a comment to the public that are here today. We have a very aggressive schedule today. So for an experienced mayor to stay on schedule and on track tonight would be very difficult. So please apologize if I start trying to expedite some things as well as we go through, but we do have a tight agenda. Part of it is that we will be leaving this evening and going to Redmond, doing some good work that I know last night we talked about concurrency and the concerns in the city about traffic, and that's why we're going to Redmond. We're going to be talking to them about SR 202 and some of the plans there for that important road. So we will have a drop-dead cutoff this evening. So with that, the next area is presentation and proclamations. Mr. City Manager, would you like to comment?
Yes, actually, I believe in the packet, we have a recognition certificate of appreciation for Pat Costello, who unfortunately is going to be leaving us, and I won't say for greener pastures, but for other pastures. Honestly, it has been wonderful working with you. You've been truly an outstanding member of the community. You are an example to other citizens on involvement. So from my personal perspective, I thank you very much for your service. And I think, Mayor, if you'd like to read the proclamation, that'd be great.
I will. Certificate of recognition, the City of Sammamish Human Services. She has demonstrated tireless commitment, enthusiasm, and organizational skills towards creating an effective and efficient human services effort for the City of Sammamish. She has reached out to help build communication, collaboration, and understanding best practices in human services as currently practiced in neighboring cities. I'd like to actually walk out and present this to Pat, but before I do that, I would like to make a comment. 2013, I think, is when I first met Pat, and she was interested in the IDEA project. And for those of you that know what the IDEA project, it's impaired driving education and action. It was the first youth-oriented drug awareness program that we actually started up in the north part of the city. I know Councilmember Odell and other council members were involved in this, but that's where I met Pat and her interest. She had it far before she came to Sammamish, I think in Florida, her hometown. From that, she really moved into the Influence the Choice, if you know what that is. That's another drug prevention program, and has been instrumental in the Sammamish Drug Free Coalition that has just gotten kicked off the ground. And she leaves us to go to Washington, D.C. to, I think it's CADCA is the organization that is a national organization that promotes drug awareness, and I believe she's going to be vice president of the training, national training for those programs. So we're losing a wonderful contributor to our community, but on the other hand, Pat will be nationally helping supporting the programs that we're trying to get started here. So I
Hey,
really.
Bob, give me back this.
Oh, yes.
Where's the photographer?
Where'd Larson go? Wait, one more spontaneous pick.
He's got his phone up.
I'd take one too, but I'm not allowed it.
Congratulations, Matt, and we'll miss you so much, but we know your work will still help us here. Thank you. You've been great. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Pat.
Congratulations, Pat. We're going to miss you terribly.
Good luck in the next Washington.
That's right, exactly. I have to keep knowing where I am.
Yeah.
Okay, well, from there, the next item on the agenda, just to make sure, is public comment. And so, public comment, this is an opportunity for the public to address the council. 3 minutes limit per person, or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization. Please be aware that council meetings are videotaped and available to the public. Thank you for that, for the list. We have Charles Mayer.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council and staff members and Director Howard. My name is Charles Meyer. I live at 2121 East Lake Sammamish Place Southeast. Our home overlooks the East Lake Sammamish Trail. The subject that I want to talk about briefly is trail usage. As part of their justification for both the stop sign location on 206 and the paved width of the trail, King County claims that there will be 4,000 users per day. I firmly believe that this is an absurd claim. Consider 4,000 users per day for a summer 12-hour day equates to 1 user every 11 seconds. This usage is far greater than anything we have ever observed. For instance, I counted the users for a 13-minute period on Memorial Day weekend in mid-afternoon. It was a beautiful sunny day. Temperature about 80 degrees, in other words, a perfect day to be outside enjoying the trail. There were 8 people who used the trail in 13 minutes. In other words, 1 user every 98 seconds, 9 times less than the county is claiming. We have observed trail usage for many years, and I can assure you that the measured usage observed is similar to the other times we have watched trail usage. 4,000 users per day for an 8-hour fall-winter day equates into 1 user every 7 seconds. No one in their right mind would consider this kind of usage when the temperature is in the 30s and rain is falling. 4,000 users per day for a 4-month period, for example, May through August, equates to almost 500,000 users, 492,000 to be exact. 4,000 users per day for a whole year equates to almost 1.5 million users, 1,460,000 to be exact. These are ridiculous numbers. They simply don't pass a sanity test. Consider also that Sammamish population is about 55,700 estimated in 2017. Issaquah, about 37,000. Redmond, about 63,000. It is ridiculous to think that a high percentage of every man, woman, and child in these 3 cities, whether 2 weeks or 95 years old, and regardless of where he or she lives, would be a regular trail user, but that is what it would take to reach the county's numbers. Up until now, the county's estimate has gone unchallenged. I encourage the city, if it hasn't already done so, to hire your own consultant to arrive at a more realistic trail usage. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any of the council member have any comments?
Yeah, I have a question or comment for the city manager. With those 4,000 users every 11 seconds, King County had committed. Please enter your speed that's taking place of all 4,000 of them. Has there been any follow-up action as to how they will enable audio that they promised to enforce on the trail?
Actually, at this particular point in time, I decline comment since we are in litigation with the county on the trail.
So after the smoke clears?
Okay. Doesn't look like, yes?
Just one quick comment. The latest numbers indicate that actually Sammamish is about 62,000, couple hundred, and Redmond is 100 less. So just to correct the numbers.
We try harder.
Well, thank you for your comments. Next on the calendar is the consent agenda. I'm sorry. As amended, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
That delay was an aye. Okay. So by your vote of 7-0, we have approved the consent agenda calendar. Next area is public hearings.
No. Mr. Washington.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Item number 2.
Actually, does he want to run?
City manager, would you?
Do you want to run through and talk about what you approved?
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Okay, under the consent calendar, first item is payroll for period ending July 5th, 2017, for pay date July 5th, 2017, in the amount of $403,148.11. One, approval of claims for period ending July 1st, 2017, in the amount of $900,884.56 for check number 47636 through 47748. Item number 2 has been moved. Item 3, approve minutes from June 27th, 2017, special joint meeting with the Issaquah School District. That's it? So thank you so much. So the next item on the agenda is public hearings. Mr. City Manager, do you have a comment?
Number 5.
Yes, actually, I believe we've adjusted the schedules.
Human
So the
Services.
I'm
next,
sorry.
the next item is discussion related to formation of a Human Services Commission. And we're fortunate tonight to have Tom Ehlers here with us, and Jesse Bond will do the introductions.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you.
On your first night as mayor, we decided to mix up the agenda and put everything in a different order, just to test you. I am joined tonight by Tom Ehlers, the chair of the Human Services Task Force. He served this past year as actually, I believe, the co-chair, but with Pat's resignation, he stepped into the role just last week. Yeah, you may recall when we formed the task force, one of the items you assigned to the task force was to evaluate the formation, the potential formation of a Human Services Commission. They have been working on that and prepared a recommendation that's included in your packet. And Tom, I'll turn it over to you now, and you can share some of the highlights.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for the time on the agenda tonight. And my you have the two-page document that recommends we form a commission, and there really are three key points to be made there. The first is that we feel we've done a lot of very good work on behalf of the city of Sammamish on the task force, primarily around identifying and acknowledging the grant request program, creating a scorecard, and better understanding what the true needs are in the city. The first point I want to make is that the formation of a commission will allow us to think more long-term than simply an ad hoc task force. So that's the first point. The second is that it will allow us, by creating a more permanent body, allow us to benefit from cumulative knowledge, accumulated learning, and really allow us to act and know in the community rather than just having a new group be put in place as needed. We're going to be able to create a body of work and a body of knowledge that will be ongoing. And then finally, it really will allow us to help the city of Sammamish become even more of a regional leader. We've already reached out to our peers in our sister cities, most of whom already have a commission, and we realize that by simply having a place at the table, we can create more efficiency and effectiveness for all of our programs. And we also see an opportunity as we grow to create true leadership relative to our diversity and relative to the needs in our community. So I won't go through the specific proposal, but I'm here to answer any questions. But at this point, we strongly recommend that we form a commission, and we look forward to leveraging that long-term learning, as I mentioned.
I should also mention, Councilmember Hornish is on the phone. This proposal did go to the Human Services Committee on the 27th, and they recommended this come forward to the council for further consideration. If the council would like to proceed with the formation of a commission, we would next prepare an ordinance to come to you in September, which would allow for the commission to be officially formed and a recruitment process to follow the same schedule that the recruitment process that we follow, for the other commissions. So that's the timeline and what we're looking at. Councilmember Hornish, did you want to make any comments on behalf of the committee? If you're there.
I really don't. I'm kind of anxious. I think we've already shown that the committee recommends this, so I'm kind of open to listen to the other council members and their thoughts.
Other comments? Oh. Okay. Tom?
Thank you. I think this is something that's needed, but I guess the first question I have is what are your thoughts with respect to the composition of the commission and how the members might be selected? Are you looking for...
To Jesse on that?
We did discuss this.
Actually, Jesse, it'd be easier for you to answer, Jesse, since we discussed it.
Yeah.
Sure. We did discuss it. I included a short paragraph in the cover memo. The theme of the discussion was to keep the size of the commission smaller. The size of the task force has been a nice working number of 7. The upper limit of our other commissions is 9. I believe the recommendation coming out of our last meeting was to hold it at 7. And the selection process would follow the same process you use for your other commissions, which would be an application process, and actually the process changed this last year. I'll have to look to the city clerk to remind me. A number of the top candidates came to you for final interview and then appointment.
So would you reach out to, say, for instance, schools, the providers, seniors, the service organization specifically? Would you want to be sure they were included, or would you want them to just throw their names in and the council pick?
Well, I would say that with our group of 7, it has been a very, very effective number and a very spirited, dedicated group. And what I particularly appreciate is how we were all selected by you all, actually. And I know as we move into the commission, there would be a broader vetting, but certainly I would encourage a very, very broad scope of experiences be brought to bear as the city of Sammamish is, of course, growing and becoming more diverse every day, aging population, et cetera. So I would encourage a sense of having representatives from each of those groups be put on the commission. I would believe that it's time to go to a standard way of choosing the commission, similar to how the other commissions are done. But I will underline that the group has been, I thought it was well selected and very, very ready to do good work together. So that particular way of starting up a task force was very insightful, and it worked really well.
Thank you, Tom.
Let me jump in here, Tom, because I agree with that, what you just said, Tom, but I think if we go to the standard way, we may not, and Tom, too many Toms there, Tom Odell, we may not actually, unless we want to say that we want to have X, Y, and Z on the commission, I would suggest that we open it up to all of the same and more of the groups that we recruited and appointed for the task force, and then go through the standard procedure and process for selecting the council member or the commission members, and then hopefully we as a council could, designate who we want with a wide focus, if you will. But it may not be the same as it is right now. And when I wasn't thinking we could propose that, Jesse. I don't know. I don't remember talking about that specific.
I think we still have some time to discuss that as well, though. Good thoughts.
Okay. One final question from me for either Jesse or Lyman. How would this be staffed by the city, and any idea what this might entail expense-wise?
Well, we will have, I guess, shared staff that would support this. This is something that we are working on coming out of the financial retreat. It would come with a cost, and we do intend to basically give to the council, to the finance committee, basically what our cost is of supporting these committees. So that would be comparable to the other committees. I don't have that number right now, but it's a staffing situation and time. So
I can probably add on that as well. Mr. Kaler in the audience, I had originally recommended that we hold off on the formation of a commission until the needs assessment was completed, but I got a little pressure from the task force to move forward. And the compromise was, at this point, the scope of work of the commission would largely be the scope of work of the task force, so nothing new yet. The point at which the council, to our city manager's point, determines to expand the scope, we will need to take a look at resources. But right now, between myself, the clerk's office, and the community services coordinator position, we are supporting the existing task force. The meeting frequency would be about the same. The main item they would be working on going into next year would in fact be the grant program, evaluating the grants. And as 18 rolls on, we will have more information from the needs assessment and likely a conversation about a scope of work for human services, whether it may change or not, and then we would have a discussion about staffing changes. So at least in the short term, I think the staffing levels will stay about the same.
Very good. We have 4 council members interested in commenting. First, Deputy Mayor Malchow.
So I was originally on the Health and Human Services Committee when we kind of brought up this idea of having a task force, and I think it was with the ultimate vision of creating a commission. I know that those that we selected, we tried really hard, those buckets that are listed in our packet here, the faith-based organizations, schools, and so on. We tried hard to find an individual to fit each one of those. We actually had a little bit of a challenging time doing that. Though I would hope with the creation of a formal commission, we might get a broader base of people. Plus, we're doing a Health and Human Services needs assessment, which might also help. Would also hope that those that served on the task force would put their name in for the commission. They did great work and hard work in a pretty short amount of time. So I'm certainly very supportive of creating a commission.
Very good. Next up is the immediate past mayor, Jaron.
Well, in the past, the city clerk and a couple of council members did the grant review requests, and I think the formation of a commission is definitely a step in the right direction. And so I look forward to having that happen in the fall.
You, Councilmember Huckabee?
Yes, I have a comment and a question. I'm very supportive of the Human Services Commission, and even more supportive after hearing how some of the agencies, communities on the east side are starting to try to pool resources together and work together to address common goals and things that are falling through the cracks. So I think the more we have a permanent commission who can be our eyes and ears out in the community, looking and making contact with people in other communities to try to build that human service menu that we can provide to our community, the better. So I'm very, very supportive. The one question I have is, how will this commission interact with the needs survey? I have to say that I was a little surprised on the needs assessment last night, or at least the first report, that it was a little light, and there was some depth and some questions and some holes that I saw in there that could be filled with a little help from people who are aware of what's happening in the community and can maybe point them in the right direction to fill some of those holes.
You, Councilmember
So,
Valderrama.
very good point. In fact, tomorrow evening, we're meeting with Burke to get a very similar briefing, and that is exactly what our hope, our aspiration is, that we can represent the broad community and challenge when needed, whatever holes are there. I can say when we've brought to them our concerns or questions, up to this point, they've been very, very responsive. And we've got a group that I think represents a broad sweep of the community. So if there are specific items, of course, that the council wants us to push on, please let us know that. But we would be ready and stand able and ready to do that with them starting tomorrow night.
Councilmember Valderrama.
You know, I've been very supportive of this task force. I think a commission would be a beneficial step. My concern actually was reiterating now Mayor Keller, your first comments when the commission was raised back 2 years ago was that you were opposed to it because of the size of the support staff that was necessary. I believe you cited Bellevue as the one that had a large staff. So that's a concern of mine, to see what is the real cost of trying to support a commission versus the task force. Hopefully, as you had said, that we can maintain it at the same level, and that would be great. We should also be able to get some savings now that Allison is withdrawing. Her position, when it was originally construed, included strategic planning, which we then took out of her role and gave her the contract that was let to look at strategic planning. So that position has time built into it that was going to be now vacant. And so hopefully that could also be of support to this commission from its original job description that was put in. So with that as a caveat, I'm very supportive of this.
And I should mention, you just reminded me, Councilmember Valderrama, the Community Services Coordinator position was originally a half-time position. In the last budget, we increased it to three-quarter time to support, the task force. So that would maintain, that extra quarter will still be available to continue supporting a permanent commission should you decide to move forward.
That's correct. The extra quarter plus the strategic planning that position has not been doing in the job description.
That position has been very actively involved in the strategic planning work.
Very good. I too would like to say that the work that the task force has done has been really exemplary. And I appreciate it. I understand what Councilmember Valderrama, the point about being concerned about the scope of the commission expanding too much. Redmond, I believe they have 2 full-time equivalents that are actually supporting their Human Services Commission. But I think that when we get through the needs analysis, we're going to really know what we do need, and we might find that our staffing needs are going to be quite different than what Redmond has. I believe that. So I have been trying to get to item 4, public hearings. I've been working to get that.
Thank you.
I think we,
Or something on this action.
I think we heard direction to move forward
Yes.
That's correct.
with bringing back an ordinance.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we're going to item 2.
Yeah, we're going to item 2 next.
Oh, yeah, but that was in unfinished business after public hearings, I thought. Oh, is that unfinished business?
I think we're going to
Did up here? Okay. Okay. Now that I have that clarification, next item is the item number 2 that was pulled from the consent calendar. Councilmember Valderrama pulled this. Would you like to comment?
Well, I'd like to see first if staff has a report on it. I saw an email from Lyman Howard. I don't know if there's any presentation from staff, or since we got a slide in front of us, I assume there is.
Yes, we actually did a brief presentation for you.
Please,
so
and
we
I can shoot it down.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Actually, really brief, just some photos. We thought it might be helpful to see visually what's happened out at the entrance to this Central Washington campus. You may recall from previous email exchanges in your packet, this is a pavement repair contract for the Central Washington campus parking lot. We are responsible per our agreement with Central to maintain the pavement. When we entered into that agreement, we were fully aware that we needed to do some repair work. Unfortunately, the winter season was not favorable to our pavement. In fact, to give you an example, if you step outside the front of City Hall, you will see we have some pavement work to do out there as well, which will be coming to you this fall. Initially, we had hoped to do patching work. Unfortunately, the damaged area is far more than what we can handle with just a patch. We also can't do the work in-house. It needs to be done with machinery that we don't own. So this is the area in yellow is the area of grind and overlay. In the agenda bill, we described essentially the pavement was in marginal condition. We had an unfortunate circumstance, I'm not sure how many times it happened, where we had construction trucks driving this route to turn around. That action probably happened sometime in April, caused the pavement to deteriorate to a condition that requires a grind and overlay versus just patching. We are also going to have the contractor do seal coating over the entire parking lot and restriping. Our own staff did the crack sealing work on the parking lot just this last week. So this is a photo of some of the damage that happened. To the left there, you can see that curb. That's actually where a truck drove up and over and damaged our concrete and our curbs. And then you can see all the cracking there in that photo. This is just a photo of crack sealing. That's work that's been going on in the parking lot. The seal coat will be done over the entire surface. This will actually prolong the life of the parking lot and hopefully reduce our maintenance costs in the years to come. This, to my knowledge, and Steve's been down there, has not been done. Best we can observe, there's been very limited maintenance done on this parking lot prior to our ownership. And then we will have the entire parking lot restriped as part of this process. I have Steve here because I am not a technical expert on pavement repairs. But that's the snapshot of the work we need to do. The contract itself is for about $70,000. We did ask for a $10,000 contingency in the event we encounter something that we haven't foreseen at this stage.
The other point that I would make is that we have since signed the parking lot to not allow construction trucks through that area. Where we had a problem, essentially, it would appear, are the double long trucks carrying gravel, and they, I believe, were staging there unbeknownst to us. So unfortunately, it caused some damage.
Maybe I should have said something, but I noticed over a period of several weeks, trucks were repeatedly parking there, and I was under the assumption someone would check with the city on this. I guess not. I did drive through and look at this over the weekend, and I have a suggestion that we need to look at where the keep out signs are for the trucks, because frankly, if you come in off Main, by the time the guy gets in there, you can't see the sign.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
O'Dell?
Can you repeat that, although I want to still get my position in first?
Because the signs are placed, I think they could be placed in a better location.
We can definitely look at that.
Okay.
We did verbally, our construction inspectors who are out in the field daily know all the contractors work in the area, so they did notify them of the restriction, and that seems to have done the trick.
Okay. We have Councilmember Valderrama and then Councilmember Huckabee.
The reason I had this pulled, and I appreciate the explanation and the email by Lyman, as I understand the maintenance is our responsibility. The problem that I have is that we've given this facility on lease at a ridiculously low price of $60,000 per year, if I recall correctly, and we're looking at $70,000 to $80,000 on the maintenance of this parking lot, and I want to ensure that it's in writing that we will be able to charge this at the sale at Central Washington University purchasing of this building, because had we known this prior to the actual agreement being done, I think you would have had a very different decision from the council wanting to subsidize it for that rate when we have these kind of maintenance expenses coming forward. So as long as we have it in writing and can be assured that it is in writing, that this will be part of the price. And I saw that maintenance is part, but is it in writing that they will reimburse us for all these maintenance costs, including this pavement?
It is part of the purchase price.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Huckabee.
Thank you. I was just curious, I had a question. Because the damage was caused by construction trucks as opposed to normal wear and tear, is there any possibility of any insurance reimbursement for that, some of that pavement damage?
That's a very good point. That's something we can definitely look at.
Okay.
It's a good suggestion.
Councilmember Gerand.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city manager to execute a contract with Sutter Paving in the amount of $70,456.
Second.
And authorize a contingency up to 15% for addressing unforeseen conditions.
I have a motion and a second, I believe. All those in favor?
Discussion? Can I still had a question or a discussion.
I'll get the hang of this yet. Thank you.
You have to press your button,
There's no
Tom.
button, Tom.
Yeah, I hear you. Sorry.
Okay,
Lyman, I appreciate the comment that it will be part of the purchase price. Can you point to us in the lease? I noticed when you sent the email, you quoted something, but I was surprised you didn't give us the clause in the lease that makes this part of the purchase price. Can you describe that to us or point to us in the lease? Or maybe we can postpone this until we see that language?
Actually, it was factored into the capital construction, or excuse me, capital maintenance costs when we were negotiating the sale price. So that was done by finance and rolled in.
So we knew about this before we did the whole lease, that we were going to spend this money.
Well, we knew that there was a potential of spending the money, you know, unforeseen circumstances. You know, for example, we talked about, if you recall, you know, the roof, any potential leaking, things like that. So we gave ourselves enough of a, for lack of a better term, cushion when we set the price in the agreement and what they would reimburse us for as part of that capital cost.
So we're not. So the price is set, but we're not going to now increase that purchase price by what we're now investing for the $71,000. Is that correct?
The price was set initially at $8 million with the 2% escalator clause in there, and that was negotiated with them to also include this type of circumstance.
So is it 8 million still, or is it 8,071,000?
It's
It's a million.
8 million is the sale price.
So we don't get to increase this by from our point of view, the council, an unforeseen, unexpected expense.
Yes, we do get to do that as part of the cost escalation.
But I'm asking, you're answering a different question.
I have the
Okay,
agreement.
I want to know if the purchase. Okay, well let me just ask the question point blank. If the purchase price was 8 million, and we as council did not know about this unexpected expense, is the purchase price now 8,071,000, or is it still 8 million?
The purchase price is still $8 million, and what I will say, Councilmember Hornish, is we anticipated a body of work, including maintenance and repairs, and those costs were factored into that number. At the time, we didn't know exactly what would be needed, although we did anticipate some maintenance on the parking lot. I will also draw your attention to section 25C, Roman numeral 3, which says, the city reserves... Section.
I'm trying to look at, she's referring to, I assume, something in the appendix.
It is not. I brought the agreement with me. I'm sorry. Let me qualify this. I'm reading from the lease agreement with Central Washington, section 25C. I guess it's in 25C, Roman numeral 3. The city reserves the right, but not the obligation, to annually adjust the option purchase price based on the then current market value of the premises. So there isn't an additional adjustment clause in your lease agreement.
Lyman, you said.
But we are not going to recoup the 71,000 from Central Washington.
That's my read.
If we don't spend the 71, if we don't spend the 71, we get the same price.
Not directly. It will be an indirect reimbursement.
I'm very glad. I'm glad I clarified that, because that's not what I heard the first time. Thank you.
Okay, next, Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, I still don't hear it. I guess I'm trying to figure out, you had a reserve fund that was set up for maintenance, which you set up for general items, is that correct? Of which that's where the 71,000 is coming out of? Is that my understanding?
Yes, when we factored in the purchase price,
That's right, you had a reserve fund for basic maintenance,
they made
but
assumptions.
you made some assumptions for general maintenance, of which you're now looking at taking the 71,000 out of, but was not earmarked for it. So had we not spent the 71,000, or if we do not spend the 71,000 now, we would still get the same amount of money minus that savings to go.
Correct.
Of course we could get, all right, well, that changes my position. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Malchow.
You defined it as a cushion. Do you know what the assumption was and what that cushion was that you built in?
I would have to go back and check with the finance department on that to give you the specific number.
The only reason I ask is that would actually be important to understand relative to what the cushion is, because then if there are other maintenance issues that pop up, we may eat through that entire cushion with
Right.
the 71,000 potentially. I mean, I don't know if it's 100,000 or 200,000.
I
Clarifying that would be.
I believe it was quite substantial, but we can report that back to council.
I think that would be helpful before we move forward.
Call the question.
Yes. We have a motion and a second on the table. We've concluded discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I believe we have a vote of 4-3. The motion moves forward.
I will report back to the full council on what the assumptions were as part of the contract.
Great, thank you for that discussion. I am now hesitant on saying I want to get to the public hearing. It's item number 4 here. So, Mr. City Manager, would you like to comment on the ordinance?
Well, let's see. Actually, tonight is the first reading and also a public hearing related to the amendment of the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. So we have a set of familiar faces tonight. John Cunningham is here, Victor Solomon is here, and I will let them start. And I believe we actually had some follow-up to some questions that were raised last night that we will follow up and report out to council. There were some specific questions asked, and in the interest of covering that material, we'll start with that, is my understanding.
If I might just add a comment, it looks like we're on track at 5:20 was the estimated time so far. I think our public comment, the short public comment that we had kept us on track, so thank you. And my understanding is this is going to come before us again 2 more times?
At least 2 more times. So this is the first reading. The final reading will not come to council, I believe, until November. So we've got sufficient time between now and then to have further discussions on this based on council need and desire.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council and newly elected Mayor Keller. My name is Doug McIntyre. I'm a planner with the Department of Community Development. To my left are Victor Solomon and John Cunningham, our consultants on this proposal that we'll discuss a little bit further tonight. Melanie, can you swap? So we're here tonight to talk about the first of 2 comprehensive plan amendments that were docketed at the end of 2016. The first item going through the process is the proposed amendment to the transportation element. And before I get too far in the presentation, I do want to acknowledge that I am aware that there was a very healthy discussion last night about transportation, and I was tuned in remotely, but so I'm pretty familiar with the topics that were discussed. I just want to note that while this is very much related, topics came up about concurrency, traffic impact fees, capital improvements, et cetera, the traffic model, and more. Those are related to this, but this is a distinct action that the City Council will be taking. So I do want to note that before I go too far. There are 2 distinct purposes of the presentation tonight. One is to discuss the comprehensive plan amendment process, and the second is to discuss the actual proposal and what was recommended by the Planning Commission. And you might wonder why there's a planner suddenly at the table. That is because the planning staff and under DCD, the Department of Community Development, we are the owners of the comprehensive plan. And we own the process to update the plan, we own the process to engage the public, and we also own the process for amending the comprehensive plan. So that's where I will come in tonight. And as the topic shifts over to the substance of the proposal, the 2 consultants, John and Victor to my left, will take that part and be able to answer those types of questions. And kind of a little bit of a history lesson here. I've alluded to it already, but at the end of 2016, City Council reviewed 8 proposals that were submitted on time. The deadline for annual amendment applications is September 30th of each year. At that point, the City Council, after Planning Commission, reviews the proposals and makes a decision on whether or not they are ripe or worthy of consideration under a legislative review, which happens in the following year. So that's what we're here for today. As I mentioned earlier, there were 2 text amendments that were put on the docket. So 2 of the 8 made it past the filter, and that's what we're here for now. As I mentioned, there is a 2-step process to this. We did this kind of staggered as a way in recognition of resources and time and scheduling, et cetera. So you'll see the transportation element go first, and then beginning in September, you will see a similar type of presentation related to the second proposal, which is a proposal to amend the environment and conservation element, utilities element, and the capital facilities plan element. So that will come again in September. And due to state law, cities are allowed to adopt amendments to the comprehensive plan no more frequently than once per year. So as Mr. Howard mentioned, there is going to be what we are calling a consolidated ordinance in November that will consolidate the review and amend the comp plan once. An important note about that is that the council should consider these in terms of a cumulative package. So they are not to be looked at in silos. They're related in the sense that they both amend the comp plan. Therefore, city council should look at them together. So that was done at the end of 2016. Between December and June, staff did its own review of the proposals, and then we prepared the packets and began working it through Planning Commission. And again, we staggered the review. Planning Commission across 2 meetings held a work session and then a public hearing, took testimony, and deliberated on the proposal and ultimately recommended what is in your packet today. They did have some proposed amendments to revise the proposal and strengthen it. So those are noted in the Planning Commission recommendation memo, which is the last attachment to this agenda bill packet. So that leads us to where we are today. Again, you will be reviewing what was recommended by the Planning Commission. And then tonight you will hold a public hearing, take testimony, presumably close the public hearing, and then we can take question and answer. And this item will come again next week on July 18th. And then we can further address any questions or revisions that were made.
Very good.
So I want to take it a little bit slow before we dive into the actual proposal. I do like to acknowledge the comprehensive plan as its own entity. It can be a somewhat esoteric document. It is simultaneously a broad and specific document, so that tends to throw people off a little bit. It's at its core, it's the city's official policy statement of how we wish to grow over the next 20 years. But it does relate to very specific implementation actions. So in that regard, it's both broad and specific. There are 2 distinct ways to amend a comprehensive plan. There is what we call the periodic update, which is done every 8 years. It's very comprehensive in nature. Essentially, you look at any changes to state law, you look at changes in the economy, changes in the market, and more generally, changes in policy direction. It's a very in-depth review of the comprehensive plan. And it's kicked off by what we call the adoption of a work plan, and that's a very specific action by the council, which outlines how the public will be engaged. It outlines very specific milestones in the process. It outlines a schedule. And generally speaking, the topics that will be covered under the update. So that's a very specific action by the council. And again, that update process is a policy level update. Now, I want to contrast that with what we're doing now, which is considered the annual amendment. The annual amendment is different than the periodic update in that it is very targeted. It is, generally speaking, narrowly focused. A lot of times we see proposals regarding very specific properties. As you may recall from the discussions at the end of last year, there were several site-specific requests on the docket. And this, again, happens on an annual basis. Every September 30th, we draw the line, take the applications that we've seen at that point, and then begin the discussion on the docket. And really, at its core, it's meant as a way to improve consistency, I would say. I like to summarize it that way. It's more about the implementation side of the comprehensive plan, and it's less about the policy direction, whereas, again, the periodic update is more about the policy direction. So now we can talk about the actual proposal. This was a city application, so the Department of Public Works is the applicant on this. And it is the first item that we will be reviewing under the legislative review process. The 2 main components of this proposal are to look at the city's concurrency project list and really update the framework to look at the city's impact fee, the traffic impact fee. Additionally, it is a way to update the data in the background portion of the document. The data feeds the traffic model, and it will also include data related to Klahani, which, as you know, was annexed at the beginning of 2016. The important part about this proposal is that there are no policy changes being proposed. Nothing related to any policy is being touched. It's more about the data, and it's more about refining the model and updating the concurrency list. So a little bit more specifically, the proposal is, again, incorporating more recent data into the model. It is showing Klahani, and it's recalculating the level of service deficiencies analysis based on the updated information, and then again, setting the basis for looking at the city's traffic impact fee. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John Cunningham. Thank you.
So good evening, Council. Good to be back with you again. Just from seems like just a couple of hours ago that we ended last night's session. So the city manager Howard had indicated that there were some responses that the staff had to some of the questions that were raised at last night's meeting, and I think Steve's going to take care of those before we dive into the meat of the presentation on the comp plan amendment.
So, good evening, Mayor and Council, and citizens. So what you're going to have as it's passed down is two items. One was a finance question, the ending fund balance or current available balances of the traffic impact fee fund. It's part of the 340 fund, but again, what I'm handing you is a document that was at the back of the tip. This was at the third page of the adopted TIP. If you recall, the top section was broken out in traffic impact fee available revenues and projects that were allocated to be have money spent on them. So I just put a little table to the right that shows, as of June 30th, $10,813,471.92 was the available balance. We've spent $1.622,620.76 on Southeast 4th. So there is a balance today of $9,191,121.16. So how you would look at this relative to what I handed you, the beginning fund balance you would expect to be increased by about that $500,000 difference, because right now it shows first column, first cell, 8.516 million. Does everybody see that number? So that number, in theory, would go up by the difference between that and the 9.1. So it would become the 9.1. We don't have any money expected to be spent this year on Sammamish. So the number was asked. There's your balance. Any questions on that item?
We have, Councilmember Jaron.
Steve,
Yes, sir.
do you have any idea what the oldest impact fees in there are? In other words, how many years before we have?
Anecdotally, I do, not exactly, but we were discussing this today, and we pretty much spent a lot on 244th, about 3 years ago, so 2013. So these are not that old.
Not that old, meaning?
2013, it was zeroed out, so everything would be new since then, is what my understanding is.
4 years, so we have another 6 years to spend.
Minimum, and we have a bulk, expected to be spent on 4th. So.
Okay,
Good
thank
question.
you.
Yes, sir?
I was going to say, any other questions from the council?
The second item is a map. This is of the Issaquah Pine Lake Road section from 32nd, which is the roundabout adjacent to the fire station, down through Klahani. So we wanted to just double check measurements. So the little red bars along the way are where we snapshotted and took shoulder measurements on both east and west side. I might make note too, shoulders have not been cut, and what that means is sometimes you get the kind of biomass and grass growing onto the asphalt, which you do not notice. So we just went a quick snapshot today to where the kind of grass starts. So if you take a shovel, sometimes there's actually more asphalt underneath that, but we didn't verify that. But So yeah, the table showed that average was 5.93 total. One side is obviously much smaller than the other, but we wanted you to have current data because that was part of the questioning last night of, hey, 3.5 and 4.5. We use 6. This was
I
measured.
still have questions about this, though.
Okay.
Because in the 2015, the current edition of our transportation master plan, you were using 5 feet. Did you guys go out and met, huh?
We were. I wasn't even here, but yes, we were.
Well, we being the city,
Yes.
we're using 5 feet. So did you guys go out and measure the street before today?
We have, so there's a couple things. I know, John, this is from last year, and I don't know if Josh did measurements through GIS or if we had staff verify. Staff and I had been out on the Connor Jarvis project 4 months ago, and we did measure, and I was very aware that 6 was a pretty good number, especially on the east side, which there's much more than 6, even as the table shows. But I don't know the measurement relative to 15's change to 16, because I wasn't here.
And
so.
that's my concern, is the inconsistency. It was, in 2015, you were using 5 feet to calculate the concurrency threshold, and nothing has changed on that corridor. And unless somebody took measurements to change it, and it's not actually 6 feet, it's close to 6 feet based on your average here, but is it fair to take an average of the two sides? I don't know what's the norm, but my question then stemmed from the fact that it changed the shoulder width you were using, yet nothing in the corridor had changed. So that's why I wanted to understand why there was a change made to the concurrency threshold from 2015's comp plan to now, when no changes had been made to the corridor.
And I can speak to that, since I'm the one who did the threshold update for the city, and I did have the city go out and measure the shoulders for me and give me an average that we could use to calculate it. And what was actually used in the calculation was 6.5 feet on one side of the road and 5.5 feet on the other side of the road. So.
But your average isn't 5.5 feet on the other side of the road, is 4.3, based on what you just handed us here.
Well, yeah, and all I can say is that the city, I used the numbers that the city previously measured the shoulder at, and the average that they gave me was 5.5 on one side of the street and 6.5 on the other. And so they may have measured it at different locations than what they did today.
They measured today?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
so
that
are
was
these
that
measurements from today?
Those
or-
are from today.
Yeah, dated up top right corner, 7-Eleven.
Okay.
Were there other people out there measuring?
We didn't notice anybody. The 2 staff members. So.
Wearing your orange coats?
Of course they were. Safety first.
Very good.
So moving on to the, I guess,
Presentation?
engineering detail part of the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So what are some of the specific changes that are being proposed with the transportation element? And we'll talk about these a little bit more with each subsequent slide. But as part of the update, what we wanted to do as we looked at the 2015 comp plan, we wanted to update the traffic counts. And you recall in the 2015 version of the comp plan, they used some 2012 traffic counts and some 2014 traffic counts were used to calibrate the model. What we felt was that doesn't give you as precise of a model or a calibration as what you really should have. The model's trying to balance to 2 different years. So what we wanted to make sure that we did is that we got traffic counts sort of all at one time of the year, and that was what we would use to calibrate the model at. In addition to that, in the 2015 comp plan, there were some segments that did not have traffic counts taken on them. So there was an estimate used. In the case of one example, Sahali Way, if you look at the north corridor on Sahali Way in the 2015 comp plan, you'll see that the same traffic volume was used for each section, for each segment of Sahali Way. When I looked at that as part of discussions of the Sahali Way project, I said to myself, that's impossible. And so there were some of those kinds of errors that we wanted to correct in the update. The other thing we wanted to make sure that we had as I said, we had a traffic count in every one of the segments that the city is monitoring for level of service failure and concurrency. Intersections, when we took a look at the intersections, we felt that the number of intersections that the city was monitoring for level of service failure was insufficient to really give the city a good overall picture of what's happening. And again, I think one of the places where that came to light was with the Sahali Way project. There's a number of intersections on Sahali Way that either were close or were failing their level of service in 2015 or in 2015 when we were looking at the Sahali Way project. And so it sort of was like, okay, we really ought to be monitoring more of those intersections. If we're going to have intersections that are going to be failing and we're not going to be able to put those in the traffic impact fee calculation because they're not a part of the comprehensive plan and they're not a part of what the city's monitoring, we need to make a correction there. Segments, we also looked at the segments and felt that in many cases we needed to add subsegments to the segments that the city already is monitoring. A number of reasons for that. It may have been because the traffic volumes changed substantially within a given segment. And so rather than use one volume to represent that, we felt it was better to break that up into two or maybe even three segments so that we got a better average of what the traffic was doing over that segment. In some cases, the cross-section look of the segment changed substantially. You might have a portion of it that had a two-way left turn lane as an example, and a portion of the segment that didn't. And so in some cases we broke the segments into subsegments based on that. And as we discussed last night, in some cases it was a matter of, rather than having one long segment that was maybe too big of a project for the city to undertake, either financially or impact to the community or any number of other reasons, that was another one of the criteria that we looked at to break segments, existing segments, up into subsegments. Corridors, we actually added a few corridors to be monitored. Again, it was sort of the same as with the intersections, and looking at maybe the city ought to be monitoring more of the corridors within the city for level of service failure than they were. If we truly wanted to have growth pay for their share of more of the improvements that are needed around the city. Again, the traffic model, we wanted to make sure that we updated the traffic model for the land uses that had occurred, as well as the make sure it was calibrated to the current traffic counts. We also needed to update the model because in the 2015 roadway network, we talked last night about one of the legs of the stool for the model is the roadway network. The 2015 model actually had the northeast, as an example, had the northeast 42nd barricade removed as part of its network. That affects, obviously, the way the model is going to distribute the traffic from that part of the city. One of the other improvements that we made as part of the roadway network is the 2015 model did not have some of the connections in the town center. As an example, the roadway connection that will be constructed from Southeast 4th over to 228th Avenue, that connection in the northwest quadrant was not in the traffic model, and so that skewed the projected traffic, AWDT traffic projection for Southeast 4th as an example, and really is one of the reasons I think that led to the decision in the 2015 comp plan to change the classification of Southeast 4th from a collector arterial to a minor arterial. And so because that connection is now in there, we're proposing that you change the classification of Southeast Fourth from a minor back to a collector. It's always been a collector in the previous versions of the comp plan, but in the 2015 it was changed to a minor, and we're recommending that it goes back to a collector as an example. So those are some of the reasons that led to the update, and some of the what we hope feel are improvements to the current version that you're looking at. Terms and definitions. This is a slide that anyone who was watching last night saw, and that's the average weekday traffic. Did you? Yeah, kind of go.
Yeah.
Oh, do I have a different?
Look a little different.
Oh. Okay, well, I guess I've got a different that I'm speaking. Well, no wonder everyone's looking at me with this curious look as to what the heck is he talking about.
Great.
Okay.
So we talked about this one.
So we talked about this. Was there anything else on that one that I missed?
No.
Okay.
Windsor Boulevard, you didn't specifically.
Windsor Boulevard, that was another one that, in terms of the roadway network over on southeast, 244th and Windsor Boulevard, in the model, that connection was not made. And so in the 2017 version of the comp plan, the 2016 model, that connection has been put in. So that was another one of the roadway networks, the items that we updated. Okay, maybe I'll put my notes away and we'll just look at the screen. Project lists. In the amendment, you've got a list of committed projects, and what we used for the committed projects were the projects that were in the 2017 TIP, so Transportation Improvement Plan. So that's the ones that are in the comp plan amendment that you see, and those are the committed projects are used to help determine which projects in 2035 will fail if with just the committed projects constructed as an example. And then there's another iteration that says, okay, now with those level of service failures, what additional projects are needed in order to get rid of the rest of the failures? And that's the recommended project list. So we updated the recommended project list based on the output from the traffic model, the updated traffic model. So what hasn't changed?
Excuse me, John, before
yes.
we go on, I just go back to that slide. I'm going to get on my soapbox here and saying that I hope by the time we're done with this process that we'll reconsider the Saholey Way effort. I'm becoming more and more convinced that we simply cannot ignore that issue. So with that, I'll just say,
Okay.
keep going.
So in the project list, if you go back to that one just a second.
Rebut back, that was a council decision to take that off. And the council decision was to wait for the transportation master plan. That was thoroughly discussed and vetted. So once the transportation master plan comes back, by council decision, we will relook at it.
Well, that may be, Ramiro. However, I live up there. I use that every.
I know you live there. I know
Okay,
you
fine.
have the
I'm
light.
talking, please.
Yeah, but the point is.
You're interrupting me.
No.
Excuse me, I think Councilmember Valderrama had the floor for a second. If you
Yes,
could
thank
finish.
you. The point is, this has been discussed already. As a point of order, you were on the losing side. You can't bring it up by Robert's rules. We've raised this before, so to follow the procedure.
Okay. I believe that is correct, though, by Robert's rules.
It is correct. However, a dangerous situation up there continues to exist. So with that, I'll shut up.
Thank you for your comments.
That is actually one point that I neglected to make, and thank you for bringing that up. And
my pleasure.
Reading the slide better than I did. Based on the council's decision, we did make the decision to take that project out of the committed project list. So it was a part of the 2017 TIP, but it is not a part of the committed projects list in the comp plan amendment. So what hasn't changed? The part of the comprehensive plan that we're dealing with the amendment is volume 2 of the transportation element of the comp plan. It's called the transportation background information, I believe. So we have not looked at or touched the volume 1 of the transportation element, which is where the city's goals and policies related to transportation are. That was the intent of that was it goes back to, I think, what Doug talked about, is this is kind of a text amendment, an operational amendment, if you will, to the comprehensive plan, as opposed to an amendment that looks at goals and policies. You will be looking at those as a part of your transportation master plan work that you're undertaking now. And if there are different goals and policies that come out of that, then there will be a need to go through some process to get those into the comprehensive plan. So we didn't change the existing levels of service. So the intersection levels of service that we talked about last night, none of those have been changed. The roadway threshold capacity standards, none of those have been changed, with what we think is a minor exception. You may disagree with that, but one of the things that came up when we were talking about the Sahali Way project was why do we need a two-way left turn lane or a median in areas of the roadway that are constrained from ever having left turns being able to be made from them? So one of the changes we're recommending is that in the threshold capacity calculation, in those cases where there is topography or maybe a wetland or something like that that constrains the traffic from being able to make a left turn, that those sections of a segment be credited with just as if they had a two-way left turn lane or a median, because you can't make the left turns there. So the left turns aren't going to be in the way of traffic. They're not going to be a safety hazard for, cutting in front of folks and that kind of thing. So that is a change that we're recommending in that table T8, is to be able to provide that additional threshold capacity, allowed capacity in those particular instances where there's constraint with left turns. Snake Hill is another good example of that, where you might use that. And we're still using the PM peak hour level of service, which is the current standard. So why weren't these changed? I think we talked about that. So I don't think there's any more to add there. Now this is another additional revisions that are not included in the packet. Your packet has some amended tables T7, T14, and T17. Those are the tables that list the segment and corridor level of service failures for either existing, table T7, 2035 projected with just the committed projects, table T14, and table T17, which is, excuse me, 2035 projected with the recommended project list in place. I have to fall on my sword here because I was doing some preparation work for this and for last night's meeting over the weekend, and I kept coming across errors in those three tables. And so I had not done a very good job of QAing and QCing the numbers that are in your the version of the amendment that you have now. So I am working on updating those numbers and making sure that all those numbers in that table are correct. So you will get in your packet for next week amended tables T7, T14, and T17. I'm quite a ways through that, and at least right now, there's most of the changes that occur in segments and corridors that do not fail their level of service. there are very few, I believe there are going to be very few changes in which segments fail and which corridors fail.
John?
I have a question. I've got my button pushed. I don't know if.
Deputy Mayor Malchow?
Can you give us some indication on which one? I've got notes scribbled all over this thing, and I loathe the fact of going through all the numbers again. Can you kind of clue us in on maybe where some of these changes or incorrect numbers are?
They're mostly in the calculation of the thresholds.
Great, because that's where I've got most of my questions.
Yeah. So,
The sooner we can get that, even if it's before we get our packet, that'd be helpful.
Can you perhaps highlight them by changing the color or in some other way of highlighting so?
No, they are not highlighted so far, but I can go back and compare again and contrast and highlight the ones that did change.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. That's a great
Thank
suggestion.
you. Councilmember Odell?
Yeah, John.
I've lost my screen here.
In an email to Steve, I believe it was yesterday, I pointed out some problems with T7 and T14, and I walk in, there's a new version on my desk. Are we going to get yet another change to this, or is this the change you're referring to?
This is, the change you're referring to is not the change I'm referring to.
Okay. So there's going to be a third version of T7 and T14.
Right. and-
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead. John? Back to you.
I guess we're back to Doug at this point.
Thank you, John.
Has something.
I believe I will hold my remarks for a second.
A quick comment, just to clarify too. So, power of technology. The reason it appears we may have re-evaluated Issaquah Pine Lake Road is because there was an overlay done in 2011 or 12. And I don't believe when the update was done in 14, the width was verified at all. So I think one of the engineers of the overlay program just messaged and said, hey, FYI, we had some road work that was done in between the last time it was measured and now. So that's what was brought to my attention.
Well,
but I wanted to share.
I do still have some questions on that, because as I'm processing that, it would be nice to see the documentation of when you remeasured it. Again, just
I think it was
aside from
fall.
today. And do you ever go back, is that a practice to remeasure shoulders? And if so, where else in the city have we remeasured shoulders that might have changed our concurrency thresholds that we have in front of us? I'm sure it's not just Issaquah Pine Lake Road, because I brought it up yesterday. I mean, there's got to be other roads that we would have then done that same practice for, correct?
In practice, though, when you have a new construction project or something is going on,
But there's
that would
nothing
change.
that's gone on there.
That-
I mean,
an overlay
aside from the
happened.
overlay. But so
Yeah.
we must have had overlays somewhere else in the city where we would have verified a shoulder width then too, right?
Could have, but that was just, I just wanted, you were asking why, and
Okay,
I
well, I
found
mean,
a response that I thought was
No,
reasonable.
and I appreciate that. But again, if we're remeasuring it on the one
Mm-hmm.
road that I went out to measure, certainly we did it on another road somewhere else in the city where we did an overlay.
Yeah,
If that's your practice to remeasure after an overlay, then somewhere else in the city, we've also remeasured shoulders.
One of the challenges, you have 3 different consultants that were working on this
Right.
project, and all 3 of us at one time or another took a look at various segments. So we do have several inventories that were done, not all of them in the same place or at the same time, but we can try to summarize that for you. But yes, Issaquah Pine Lake was not the only segment we looked at. We went out and measured the new ones. No one had ever measured the Klahani streets before, so they were also done to create those tables. So with the concern about traffic counts, we also took a second look at those capacities. But again, if we go out 3 years later and measure the shoulder 500 feet away from where we measured it the last time, we typically get a different number. Even if the city restriped the shoulder, that striping machine can move 6 inches pretty easily. So we did not focus on one particular thing. We tried to do an overall improvement to the plan, and that's we'll provide a list of those locations where we went out again.
So we are going to meet, if I could just comment, we are going to meet on this issue a couple more times. So would a summary would satisfy, maybe we get back to it when they've had time to actually
Well,
look
I'm
and
just
get a
looking for
summary back?
continuity in process, and I don't feel like there's a lot of continuity. And that's what I'm getting after, is that if we have certain practices, then they should always be practiced. And I'm looking at other stuff in here, which it doesn't sound like we'll have time to get to tonight, but I'm just looking for continuity in the process so that in 5 years or in 4 years, that you don't have to repeat this whole concurrency discussion for the next council. If we have continuity of process, it makes it a lot easier to unpack the information that's in front of us.
Right. Good. Okay.
Thank you. And just a couple notes before we open the public hearing. A little bit of a snapshot here on this slide of the schedule. So just again reiterating that on June 15th, Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and recommended the version that is in your packet today. And then, of course, today we will open and close the public hearing and then have the first reading of the ordinance. Next week, on July 18th, there will be a second reading of the ordinance, and I'm assuming more discussion. And then those review and deliberations will carry forward into fall, November, when we will adopt the consolidated amendment ordinance. And that will be a third reading. Thank you.
There may be options also to, between July 18th and November, to have further discussion. So I'll point that out.
The Deputy Mayor would like to.
I just have a quick question. So in the PowerPoint presentation, it said there weren't any policy-related changes in here. How would you like us to bring forth any policy-related changes that we would like to discuss with the full council?
So that's a good question. Generally speaking, the docket that was set at the end of last year narrowly defined the proposed amendment that would occur this year. So to that extent, there was nothing in there about policies, and therefore staff went down a path of reviewing and analyzing the non-policy changes. So it is I believe within the realm of the council's authority to amend the proposal. I may have to
get a
look
clear
to,
reading on that before we all
City
start.
manager, give us a reading.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk to the city attorney about that, but I think the major policy changes we are looking for from the council as far as interaction and suggestions would be through the TMP. That is what we're trying to focus all of our efforts on, to bring that forward, and then whatever changes are outlined there by way of policy, then we put it into the docket request to then adjust the comprehensive plan based on those policy changes that come out of that.
But we're not expected to finish the TMP until next year, and so if there's a desire to amend something else, and the something that I'm talking about is the segment averaging that we use, is there a mechanism to amend that, or at least have the opportunity for the council to discuss amending that policy prior to the TMP?
I think we could probably discuss that. I don't know, it's not part of the work plan at this particular point, and it may push the TMP back, but we can definitely discuss that as far as the best options going forward.
Okay.
Very good. Okay, it looks like Councilmember Valderrama, are you? No?
No, that was me. I still have my button on.
We have Councilmember Odell.
Just a very quick request. For this particular document here, can we get an index of all the charts and the pages? So I don't have to plow through the whole packet looking for something. Thank you.
Okay, I see no more council member questions here.
Actually, Jeff has, I think, a comment.
Very quick,
Okay.
if I may.
Yes, please.
Good evening, Mayor, and congratulations as well as to the new Deputy Mayor. Jeff Thomas with Community Development. Very quick comment to follow up on Doug's response from a few moments ago to the question about getting in and looking at the policies in the transportation element. The update was docketed as a fairly narrowly scoped technical update. One of the challenges that we do get into with starting to review policies in the annual amendment process is policies in one element can start to impact policies in other elements. And some of that can start to unwind fairly quickly when we try to do that on the fly and without the benefit of the prior legislative review by the Planning Commission that finished their work in June. So what I would recommend from the planning department perspective is if the council is interested, in addition to the work you're doing on the TMP, and taking a look at policies in the comp plan in the transportation element. That's something that we can discuss docketing for next year, and then we'll want some time to work with that and to bring that through the docketing process to be able to explain to council different areas of interest that there may be some impacts going from element to element in the comp plan. So it's, the left wrist is attached to the left arm and so forth.
The docket process actually starts in September. Is that correct?
Correct. The deadline for proposals is the end of September, and then we move it through that same process that you went through last year that we all remember quite well. And that would help then set what items receive legislative review in 2018, just like we're doing here tonight with this. So,
Thank you for that reminder. I think we've run into that crossover with elements before where changes in one policy affects others.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Yes, I was going to kind of comment on that, because if we're going to consider policy changes, then I think it's fair that we all be able to consider policy changes, or nobody should consider policy changes because of the complexity of doing so. But I'll let you guys deal with that. The one concern that I had was the one comment that was brought up last night, and it was Victor's suggestion, which I thought was really very interesting. And Dawn, I think you took a note on it, and that was the traffic demand policy that we could look at in terms of imposing that on schools. And I don't want to forget that. I'm hoping that we can parking lot that someplace so that when the discussion does come up for policy changes, that one gets looked at, because that's certainly a major issue in the city.
You mean the traffic mitigation thing, Kathy?
No, the traffic demand.
Mitigation.
No, it's the traffic demand program.
Okay.
Okay, are we at public hearing at this point? Okay, so my first gravel strike, open the public hearing.
Could be a little more forceful, confident.
Working on it. I would like to welcome Jim Stanton up to the podium.
Oh, there he is.
Good evening. Jim Stanton, 32533 Southeast 47th Place, Sammamish. I may be the only one here that watched all 5 plus hours last night. Thank Cunningham for hanging in there on that. It was interesting during dinner, but when it went past bedtime, the concern there that might go on forever.
So anyways, I'm here to talk about 3 issues that came from, that were reminders from last night. One is equity of project delivery through your TIP and transportation element. 2 is the issue of AM and PM counts. I know there's been a policy discussion about that. And 3 is just my understanding of concurrency, having been in the business and worked in Redmond for many years during GMA in 1995, and what I recall, at least, relative to concurrency. I'm glad that I'm no longer in that business. So, but having said that, let me talk first about equity. Normally, I make an annual pilgrimage to City Hall when you consider the TIP, and I've been doing that, I think, since 2007, on and off. Last year, we've had neighbors come with me, and I think they're running out of steam, quite frankly, so I'm here by myself. Last year, we also had John Cunningham and Doug Schlepp from the city of Issaquah and the city of Sammamish come and talk about development in our neighborhood, and that was very helpful for them to kind of understand what was happening. But, since 2013, this issue of equity really ties in with the discussion I think that Councilmember Malchow raised about Issaquah Pine Lake Road. That project has been off the list, on the list, funded on the list, defunded on the list, and now back to zero. So again, it just raises the issue of, particularly for those of us that are longtime residents who have been paying property taxes with the expectation that those improvements, if we waited in line and took our turn, that those improvements somehow would eventually come to us. And I'm not sure that I see the equity in the way that happens, most notably because Issaquah Falls City Road is getting full treatment by virtue of a negotiation between two cities, which pulled that project forward. And those that live in Klahani who paid maybe 6 months worth of property taxes are going to benefit by that project directly, where in fact, we've waited our turn and we don't see that. So there's the issue of equity, there's the issue of segment averaging, there's the issue of how those projects are put and funded, which I think are important. But beyond that, the piece that has not been discussed is about the 1/8 mile that Issaquah is responsible to build on their side, and that's an $11 million project for about 1/8 to 1/4 of a mile. And since Sammamish has decided to take that off the list, they've also decided to defund that as well. So now there's been talk about the fact that between the two cities there'd be some sort of right-of-way trade so that Sammamish would get control of that right-of-way down to Issaquah Falls City Road in exchange for right-of-way on 43rd Street, and try to work that out. But my point is that from an equity standpoint, it just, however we do the math and however we decide to do the science, it just seems patently unfair that at this stage we don't have that project on the list. AM and PM counts, just very briefly. As I think Victor explained eloquently last night, you have a unique situation in Sammamish where you have the bulk of the trips leaving in the morning and coming back at the end of the night. That's not a typical urban sort of situation you would find in Bellevue or Issaquah or Redmond, where trips are coming and going all day, both directions. You also have the phenomenon of 3 high schools within a half a mile, which has a very specific point AM and PM peak that impacts the network significantly, and I don't think that's reflected by just looking at PM peaks or the PM counts. So again, I just encourage you to reconsider that policy to look specifically at how counts are done. And then lastly, just the concurrency issue. I know there was discussion about the expectation behind what GMA anticipated, a 6-year window to bring projects online. And if they weren't online, what happens? I think the drafters of GMA expected that projects would be funded and that getting it on a list would mean that both the local jurisdiction as well as the state would help to fund that through grants. But the issue of projects going on the list and then coming off the list just means that the nexus between what you're charging with a mitigation payment or what a developer is charging geared to a specific list of projects that then is part of the model, unless there's continuity in that list, that changes the dynamic both from a legal expectation from a developer's funds going to the projects that are identified at the time of their development, but also an expectation of delivery of projects, as I mentioned before. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate your comments.
Now, I have a question to the city manager. Jim just raised the point that we've had on 3 other occasions been raised about the horse trading that people have been told that exists between Issaquah and 43rd Street here in Sammamish. It's my understanding that the council or the city of Issaquah has never formally approached our city for that horse trade, is there?
That is correct.
And so I know that they've mentioned it to citizens who have come to us on that, but the city of Issaquah has never raised that to this council or to this city. And so I hope that if somebody has that issue, that should be brought back to them, that we know nothing of this.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember, or excuse me, Deputy Mayor Malchow.
The AM/PM thing, I wanted to just bring one thing that was troubling me, is that we were only counting the PM peak because that's the model we had, correct? But that wasn't what the policy was. The policy stated AM or PM, whichever was greater. And while it may never have been the intention to capture the AM, the fact is that that was the policy. And so that was kind of a breach of policy, frankly, that we never looked at the AM policy. It was in there. We were supposed to. We didn't have the model, but we should have had the model. And the other thing was that came up last night too, was the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But that wasn't the policy. The policy was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But we counted Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Inconsistencies again that we need to close the loop on.
Good. Thank you. Looks like Councilmember Valderrama.
Just one question. I concur that we need to have the consistency. The one thing that I got from the presentation yesterday, or my understanding was that where they did look at the AM differences, it was only a 5% difference. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I think
In those three cases that it was different and in favor of the AM, that there was only 5%.
I keep hearing the emphasis on traffic counts. What you want to know is what is the intersection delay during the AM, because a lower count can have a higher delay. It's not as simple as, well, more traffic is always more delay. More traffic through a more efficient intersection can be less delay. So during 2016, AM counts were collected for all the intersections. The TMP is going to provide you with the AM level of service that you can compare at all those intersections to the PM. That was really a major intent of kind of crunching all these numbers, was to inform that TMP process. And as far as the switch from AM to PM, the correction was made in 2015 to acknowledge, yes, we do have a policy that says we should look at both. We are not. So the consistency was created back then. So we're square today. If you want to go back and reinstate that, that's this next step. But as of now, we recognized that several years ago and corrected it because we didn't feel the resources to address that issue were important. Now that appears to be different.
Okay, I'd like to get us a little bit back on track. Councilmember Odell is up to comment next, but after your comment, I'd like to ask the public if there's anybody else that would like to make a statement while the public hearing is open.
And could I just interject to follow up on Victor's? I actually have asked staff to look into what process or what cost, et cetera, would come into play if we basically had a AM model as well, so we could do that. I think we owe council that information so that you would have a point of comparison.
That would be helpful. Okay. Councilmember Odell?
My question's been addressed.
Okay, very good. Okay, I'd like to then go back out. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a comment for the public hearing? I see no comment. So my question is, should we be closing, the suggestion from the city manager, close this public hearing?
Or continue it?
Or continue it?
I would continue it.
Okay. So, does that deserve a strike?
Sure.
So we'll continue this public hearing. And we'll move on to the next item. I think time-wise, now we are very close. So, we've covered the Central Washington, we've covered Human Services, we are now in council reports.
That's what I thought.
Would we like to start down with,
Missed what
Deputy Mayor?
are we doing?
We're at council reports.
Oh, sure.
Deputy Mayor, would you like to start?
So hopefully you all have a copy of my council report, and I think the PIC is meeting, Public Issues Committee is meeting tomorrow, and I suspect, the Veterans Seniors Health and Human Services Levy will again be discussed, and I would like to bring back our council's position to PIC on that. We had some discussion yesterday, and I kind of summarized that a little bit here, that it sounded like there was general support for the idea of the levy, but there were some concerns from our council. Again, PIC is not going to likely to take a position. They would just be using this information,
Yeah,
so.
I'm not supportive of it. just 'cause of
Councilmember
the timing.
Jaron, does that, excuse me, Councilmember Jaron, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I am supportive of the levy and make sure that the veterans and human services aren't reduced on the next levy. So I think at the $10 or 10 cents, it was,
That's where it's currently at. That's not to say that it'll stay there, but it's currently at 10 cents.
they were talking 10 or 12.
Well, no, I think if anything, it's probably going to go down because it's been going down.
Good. But I'm supportive of the levy.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Odell is next up, and then Councilmember Valderrama.
I'm supportive of the veterans levy. I think what we have here is mission creep going on, though, in a way. I would prefer, if we're going to vote on things, let's split it up and vote on the individual pieces rather than package it all up. That way, the veterans who've been recipient of fundamentally of this levy for years don't get maybe dragged down by somebody piling on. I'm not saying that the other two issues, seniors and health and human services, are not valid. I believe they are, but I think they need to be looked at separately as opposed to a package. Thank you.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the cause. The problem is the timing is terrible. I think you do have to look at them separately. The numbers and the costs of the latest tax today, the Seattle Times was saying they calculated for Mercer Island that the average household will be paying $1,200 under the new McCleary taxes. So I think with all the other taxes that are coming down, this is ill time to have any levy until everything is sorted out and the dust settled and understood properly implications.
Councilmember Huckabee?
Yes, I'm really supportive of a veterans levy, and we'll be talking with Hank later this evening, who has been very involved in working with veterans and trying to bring veteran services to the Together Center. It seems like the challenge grows greater, and particularly as people are returning from Afghanistan, older veterans are experiencing more levels of PTSD, and frankly, the suicide rate should embarrass us all, and that is not being addressed. But I do think that from Councilmember Odell's point, I think we need to separate this. I'm not sure what the situation is with regard to seniors, but seniors come in all flavors. Veterans with issues don't come in a bunch of different flavors. You have wealthy seniors, you have seniors that have housing that may need money to help pay for that housing, but I would like it more targeted and more definitive rather than just kind of splashing it across the board.
Thank you. My comment very quickly, I too am supportive of the levy. I think that the increase that they were originally asking for was rather high, that I think it was close to triple the level that they're at right now. So I think that 10-cent mark and under would be probably appropriate, that we keep it under that range. Or any comments?
I can weigh in too, Bob. I reiterate my position before, Chrissy, and I don't know if we have a position as a council, just FYI, with all the disparate comments we're getting. But I still contend that we keep it at the current rate for the current recipients and do not add any new recipients.
Well, I think what I can do is probably take back our collective.
Yes.
I don't know that we need a position specifically as a council, but I can kind of take back a lot of our comments
I think that's a good plan.
and unpack that.
The heroin injection site.
That's
that-
Councilmember, or Deputy Mayor.
Pardon?
Malcho's comment.
Oh,
Is there something else that we need to
I
talk
did.
about with heroin?
This is not related to the Public Issues Committee, however. But
Oh, okay.
the discussion of heroin injection sites, I believe that our city council needs to take a position on this. Otherwise, we will by default become an option for a heroin injection site.
So are you asking for now?
Well, I think we can have a discussion. We
Yeah,
can
I
take
would
a
say-
formal position now. I would advise that we sooner than later take a position on this.
I mean, I would suggest that this is something that we talk about later, because I think it's probably more in-depth that we have an executive session we are going to move into. Worthy discussion, but could we do that in another meeting, would be my suggestion.
I would suggest this month before we go on the break.
Would you like us to try to schedule a discussion for next week?
If we have time on the calendar, I think that would be appropriate.
I think we'd like to really understand what the ins and outs of this are, who's going to be running the injection site. So I think a much greater conversation.
I think we need to know a lot more about it.
Yeah.
I would look to staff then to maybe
Yeah.
collect some
give us some
information on it.
background.
I don't have all the details. I just know that if we don't take a position, we might become an option.
We will.
And
We are
along with
do our
that,
best.
can we get some statistics on heroin usage and heroin overdoses in the city? Or what some of the negative implications are if we do not have an injection site?
Okay. Councilmember Valderrama?
Yes, tomorrow I'll be attending a fire demonstration exercise at SeaTac Airport. On EFR, we will be addressing a number of issues, continuing to look at the criteria for expansion. And then later on the city manager's report, I understand we are going to be talking about the financial retreat and what the expected information will be given back to us for policy making. So I'll leave that for the city manager.
Great, thank you.
No report?
No report. Councilmember Jaron?
Thank you. Just briefly, a week or so ago, I met with Glenn Bauer, who was on our technology committee probably 10 or 15 years ago, and he's now the president of IceSoft Stone, which is a competitor to INRIX. And I suggest that we check with them also when we talk about our traffic demand model and getting real-time data for congestion. And that's all I have.
Don, do they have anything we can look at, published or anything like that?
Well, they have a website I looked at, but maybe you can contact them for some. They're working with Bellevue, Kirkland, and Redmond, the so-called innovation triangle.
Oh.
Actually, probably should be an innovation quadrangle if we add to it.
Could you send us the website, perhaps?
Well, it's IceSoft Stone.
How do you spell that? I can't understand.
ISOFTSTONE. That's my report.
Just one item for me, and that is that we all know that starting next summer, we're going to have Issaquah Falls City under construction. And that raises a number of issues, along with the fact that congestion in the area may be a little more difficult than it's been. In fact, I can guarantee it will be. But there's some public safety issues that have been concerning too, one of which was the ability of the Advanced Life Support Unit that's based in Issaquah to be able to service Sammamish effectively because of particularly the far eastern end of Sammamish. We have been in discussions with King County EMS staff, who runs the emergency management staff, who does run the Advanced Life Support. Service to Sammamish is provided by Bellevue Fire under agreement with Eastside Fire Rescue. We've been working with the EMS staff from King County, plus Chief Clark from Eastside Fire and Rescue over the past several months, and it's been myself, Councilmember Valderrama, and Deputy Mayor Keller, along with Beth Goldberg, engaged in this whole thing. And I'm pleased to say that we have shall we say, a temporary assignment of an additional unit to Fire Station 83 to serve Sammamish, particularly eastern zone Sammamish, better during the construction period. So beginning in August of next year through the planned completion of the construction in February, there'll be an additional unit stationed in the east side, and we'll have obviously improved coverage as a result to offset the difficulty of getting around on a timely basis. We will be collecting data while this pilot project, to use a term, is underway, and it will be used hopefully downstream to provide a little better information for future services of this sort. That's my report.
Great, then I have an update on Eastside Fire and Rescue regarding the criteria direction for the chief on evaluating adding agencies to EF&R. The FAC meeting did meet, and there was some language that was produced by the chief that that unfortunately in an innocent process, it was actually given to us on short notice, so that's why I'm bringing it up right now. to the council, our normal process, as in PIC, is for the board, we need to get a thumbs up. With the council, I think most of you are aware of this, and so would like to get a thumbs up to get approval for moving this forward when the board meets and giving our approval this Thursday.
Good question. It's already moving forward.
The FAC has recommended it
That's correct.
to the board, and the board will be voting on it this Thursday.
I
So-
support it.
I'm for it. Tom? Hornish?
Yeah, I've actually looked at the language. I thought it captured what we had agreed to in the past, and you can't forget that even at the point we, Sammamish, have a veto if we're not comfortable with something that he brings to us, the chief brings to us as a new partner. We always have a veto. So I'm not sure it's worth spending a whole lot of time on.
Councilmember Huckabee?
Yes, well, it was brought up late at the FAC, and one of the reasons that I voted no is because it was not only late, but it wasn't clear. I would have hoped that we would have seen, and I would hope that when you go to the meeting tomorrow, you might ask them to give you a better idea of what this process is going to look like. The last time we went through this process, it was a $70,000 cost for a contract. So there was no time. We were given it, and we had 10 minutes to respond before the end of the meeting. So there wasn't really a chance to explore who was going to do the process, what the process was going to look like. Would there be touch points along the way for the staff to bring that back to the board to say, this is what our progress is. Do you still want us to go forward? I am concerned this is a budget year. There is some conversation about already beginning to set up how things are going to go with the next union contract. And I would like to see at least some relationship between the amount of time and money that is being spent along with board approval and some checkpoints along the way.
Very good. We'll relay that when we go to the vote.
I think we got consensus.
I think we do.
No, I
think he means a vote.
Well, actually,
I don't know that we need a vote. We just need a.
Bob, I do have.
I'm sorry. I apologize, Councilman.
Yeah, I do have a concern about the criteria for adding a new partner. I don't think the issue of ideally would not add cost or loss in service to an existing partner. I think that subject needs further exploration. Yeah, but they go on to say, if a business analysis justifies an increase in cost corresponds to an improvement of service, the addition may be warranted. I think that needs to be further defined. Otherwise, it could be anything. And what we think the chief today may have in mind may not be what another chief at some point in the future would have in mind. So I prefer to see a little better definition of what that is, frankly, to avoid a potential downstream problem where, as Tom said, we have to exercise a veto to get out of it.
So we don't have full consensus, but Councilmember Gerund?
I support it, and the reason I support it is because we're talking about wordsmithing here. Basically, if a partner comes to EFER and says, we'd like to join, first they get the approval from the partner's jurisdiction, and then it comes to the board. The chief's going to go ask the board for clarification of the process. You can have what you have listed in that agenda bill, but if he comes to the board and we say, well, we'd like you to explore this and that, the board will make a decision to either expand the process or go with the process that's there. I don't feel it's worthy of stirring up all the partners in wordsmithing this one, so I support it as is.
Me too.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, no, I would just reiterate the point raised before. I think we're spinning our wheels on a lot of nothing. We've already had this reviewed. We've submitted our language several times. They've looked at it. We have, in the end, veto at any time. They're going to do a business analysis and give to us. To take the words of always Mayor Gerand, we're going to stir the pot and risk again being told, there goes Sammamish for no reason. So let's not be Sammamish, and let's accept what we've already been agreed and move on, knowing that we have veto power. Thank
Can you tell me when we submitted the language?
Well, you were at the, were you not? Well, the city submitted it in writing at least 2 times, first under the animal control, then the second one, I believe, was again yesterday that they had submitted. You were at the FAC meeting. Bob had raised this at a board meeting. So those are 4 different incidents that I know of, not to mention offline conversation.
At FAC.
Okay, well, there's the other ones.
And I remind you that we're there to represent Sammamish.
That's correct. And we're also there, as they've reminded us, as part of the partnership. And there's a decision that was made by the partnership.
Okay. So it looks like, I'm not sure if we have a full consensus on the heads up, but we do have
Majority.
a majority to move forward. And I would add myself that I think we can ask that maybe we get some backup documentation if it's not actually in this. I'm sure the chief would be willing to maybe actually put some, because I see you're looking for more detail as to what the process he will be engaging when he starts this. So I think that's a reasonable request.
Thank you.
Okay, we are now done with council reports. That was it for tonight. To move forward, we're in executive session. Do you have?
City manager report.
I'm sorry. City manager report. Wow.
Actually, I'll make this very brief. First of all, I wanted to thank council for your participation in the finance retreat. We spent some good quality time together, and we are in the process now of reviewing the notes. So the intent is, after we get all the notes from that, we'll put together topics of discussion to meet with the finance committee. Off the top of my head, those look like there probably will be a discussion on non-core municipal services, the levels of service as far as maintenance and operations, staffing levels, and facilities inventory was one of those things that came out. So in addition to those, we'll review the actual minutes or the notes and suggestions that council made, and we'll be reviewing that with the Finance Committee so we can go forward. And then lastly, I'm very pleased to congratulate the city and our council. The Kinder Ace case suit has finally been resolved.
Wow.
I found out today.
Whoa.
The Supreme Court of the United States denied their petition for further review. So congratulations to all of us on that lengthy process.
Oh, my gosh. The UN.
Quick comment. Councilman.
City Manager, just a quick one. I'd like you to review the request that I had made during the financial retreat in my email of bringing us actionable information as to what happens and implications if we have a 5 or 10% budget reduction or staff personnel, so that we can review that and look at that as well as what you've offered. Thank you.
Well, I actually have not heard that from the majority of council.
That's why I said
so-
to look at it and bring it to the financial committee so that we have something actionable as is normal. And then the finance committee can bring back so that we can take a final decision on that.
As chair of the Finance Committee, I'd like to know if that's what the rest of the council would like to see before we take on that project.
Can you repeat specifically what you're asking for?
Yeah, what I had asked at the retreat, and per my email that I've sent you all, I had asked that he comes back to us in addition to the information that he has just listed with an actionable item to say, if we were to do a 5% cut on the general fund expenditures or a 10% cut, what would be the implications to the level of services so that we can evaluate that? And likewise with personnel. And then we can evaluate that so that as we address the issue of the deficits, we can move on something more actionable and more in line with what is the common practice in the business world.
Are you going to ask for anybody else's opinion?
I absolutely am. I'm letting it sink in myself as well. Okay, Councilmember.
Well, I don't remember us actually as a council agreeing to that request.
No, that's correct. I asked for that.
So I guess we ought to discuss whether we want to burden staff with doing that review. We talked about specific issues like fire and police that we felt were not amenable to quick cut decisions because of outside parties.
Right.
We did talk about, and we went through the list, we talked about various organizations that we're members of that we agree we're still members of. So it would seem more appropriate to ask staff to remove those items that clearly from the retreat we said are basically untouchable, and then take a look at the issues like the city manager said, the non-core ones, or level of service and maintenance operations. I know I brought that one up. And I noticed that Pine Lake Park maintenance is deteriorating rapidly. No, I'm kidding. And the staffing issue, we talked about that and said that, well, you can't just say cut so many people because we've increased staff people, because we've reorganized the staff. We brought in operations which are providing revenues in that match the staff. So it's really a complex issue, and I'm opposed to just asking staff to explain how you could do a 5 or 10% cut in the general fund. And actually, I guess you would rather have it as operating revenues than general fund, but I'm opposed to that.
Thank you. Councilmember Huckabee?
Yes, I'm opposed to it also because we have a number of initiatives on the table that we have approved that are moving through the Planning Commission and others that are going to end up taking more time and more money, specifically LID, the Urban Forestry Project. These things are all in process. And so to me, it's counterproductive to say, let's take a look at cuts and to begin to discuss that. I don't think at this point in time, until some of these other plans are through, that there should be any discussion of cuts. And I made my position clear at the financial retreat that I didn't think we should close off 40% of our budget and say that piece is sacrosanct, rather than instead of looking at and trying to work with our partners at EFR or our partners at King County to see if we can more efficiently derive those services at a lower cost.
Thank you. I just want to do a time check here.
Yes.
I know I have 2 questions that I have not touched in with Councilmember Hornish if he had any questions, but there's 3 questions up and we're out of time. And we have an executive session. So if you could make your comments brief so we can move forward with this.
Councilmember Hornish go? I heard him
Oh, he did pop
a long
off.
time ago unhook, so I'm assuming he's dying to say something.
Okay.
Thank you. And I'll just make it quick. I'm supportive of what Councilmember Balderrama is, and frankly, I thought we agreed to it, at least as to cutting the general fund and what we would have to give up and what that impact would be. I don't remember really talking about a 5 or 10% head count. That was something I think that was positive. It was thrown out as an idea, but I don't think we ever had, and everybody kind of agreed. But I think we did agree at the finance committee, or at the finance retreat, that we should look at what would be the impact if we cut the general fund and do some cuts. And I thought that was an action item coming out of the finance retreat.
Councilmember Hornish, if you're done, then I'm going to move to Councilmember Odell.
Well, we're about a month or 2 away from starting the next budget cycle. And frankly, I'm always supportive of looking for ways to reduce costs. I'm not sure, having been a victim as opposed to participant of budget cutbacks elsewhere in my career, that a broad brush approach is necessarily the way to go. I would propose that we basically leave this to the normal budget process with the Finance Committee working with the city manager on seeing what we're spending in each bucket and is it the right amount in the right place. That's my comment.
Great. Deputy Mayor Malchow?
My recollection of what we had agreed to was to look at places to identify. I think that's why we went through those lists over and over again, talking, and we kind of captured some places that we wanted to look for potential cuts. I don't recall a percentage being attached to it, but I do recall looking for places to cut, and I thought that that's what we were going to get back at some point. Is that not?
That is my understanding as well.
Okay.
Okay, and Councilmember Valderrama?
To close, several people on this council have said at the retreat and afterward to leave it to next year or infer that that's unacceptable. Most of these expenses have happened with the past councils. We need to take accountability and responsibility to start addressing this now. 3 years it's been at the retreat, put on our statement that we have a structural fiscal imbalance. Thank you.
Great, Councilmember Huckabee?
Oh, no.
Oh, sorry. Well, my final comment would actually be that the city manager continue with the plan he has, as Deputy Mayor Malcho had indicated, with those things that you gleaned out of the our retreat, and proceed with a report on those cuts. That was really my recommendation
Very
as
good.
well. So,
Very good.
Well, I would suggest we go back and look at the tape of the financial retreat, because we had a long discussion about having what the impacts would be if we cut. Now, that may not have been a percentage, but we wanted a clear, actionable plan from the city manager that if you cut X, Y, and Z, the impacts are A, B, C.
Yes, we believe that was what the direction was that we heard. So there was not a percentage that was agreed upon, but we will be looking at implications of if we cut in certain areas related to the areas that I discussed. So we will follow up with that.
great. City Manager, then if we move to the executive session, because we have only minutes left.
We can make this very, very brief, and we are going to talk about potential litigation.
Is there something that I should read?
Oh, Kinder Race is done and something else is going on. Okay.
It's litigation, potential litigation, RSW 4230.1101B.
Thank you very much.
Maybe we all need to get a CD of the